So how's it going, guys? All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome back. We've got a show for you today. Joining me is one of my editors is going to be Nesslig, who's one of our normal people who joins us. Welcome back, Nesslig.
And good to be back as always.
This, and as I understand it, you have put together a presentation for us. That is the title today. So this is going to be another Phylomaniacs episode. And also joining us, since we're talking about sauropsids today, we have brought in a resident sauropsid, the one and only Dapper Dinosaur.
That's
Welcome.
me.
How you doing?
Oh, I'm all right. How are you?
Watching things descend into chaos. Same as always.
Yeah. Well, I guess when I say I'm all right, I mean, all right as
given the circumstance.
Right. It's. I've decided to stop calling the country I live in by the name most people know it by. I'm going to start going with the Kingdom of Central North America.
The Kingdom of Central North America.
Yeah, it's descriptive and also more accurate. Because I feel like once a country's fundamental method of government changes, it's really weird to call it by the same name. That's why we call it like the Roman Republic and then the Roman Empire, right? We switch the name of the country.
Right.
So same basic idea is like, hey, once you stop becoming even plausibly a constitutional republic, and instead you just become an out-and-out non-constitution bound dictatorship, even if some of the leaders pretend not to be dictators, you got to change the name.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. While we're out here naming, giving bodies of water a new name, we might as well just rename the whole place. Let's do it. All right. So, hello everybody.
Did you already change it to the Gulf of Melania?
Well, it's the Gulf of America.
Oh.
Nobody tell Trump that there's a South America. Nobody tell him.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep calling it the Gulf of Mexico.
I mean, the rest of the world is, and what is it? They've changed, I think Freedom Fries is another one.
Are those back?
I think so.
Someone said it was the Gulf of Melania because it's wide open and immigrants are welcome to enter.
Oh my god.
I mean,
sorry,
it's a bit vulgar.
but then again, Melania is the only first lady whose nudes are just available publicly.
That is true. That is a thing that is true and can be easily verified.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's been quite a week for us over here with us. In case you guys aren't aware, the United States is no longer a member of the World Health Organization. So if a new pandemic or epidemic arises, we're just kind of on our own in that one. The National Institutes of Health were frozen, I think as of yesterday or day before, because RFK is like the head of Health and Human Services, or is going to be confirmed for Health and Human Services. And so our major health agencies in the U.S. are either now defunct or about to become defunct. So,
hey, pro tip: if the World Health Organization gives tips about how to avoid, dying or getting sick in a new epidemic, you can just privately take those on board.
That's true. That is true. Yeah.
So I would suggest doing that.
Yeah, Dapper. I don't know if you were aware, but in my state of Louisiana, RFK is good friends with our governor, and the governor picked the head of our health department, who is also an anti-vaxxer, and
Oh,
his
good.
assistant is also an anti-vaxxer. So we have anti-vaxxers top to bottom in our
Nice.
in the top of our health department. So yeah, it's cool. Anyway,
Yeah, I feel like there's a 50-50 chance I make it through the next 4 years.
yeah, it's not. Although there's also, well, I was gonna say the same could also probably be said for.
You better eat your burger well done for the next 4 years.
Yeah, that too. No more
I'd-
ordering rare meat.
I'd be willing to bet that the same might also be true of certain orange individuals. So there's that. All right, so
From your lips to God's ears.
so today, all right, so Nesslig is going to walk us through Pseudosuchian evolution. We did a series of videos a while back. God, that was like 4 or 5 years ago on the evolution of dinosaurs.
Yeah, we did.
Oh yeah. Mhm.
But we did not talk about Pseudosuchians. I don't think we've ever done a video on Pseudosuchians before. So this will be a
we
first.
we
for us.
briefly mentioned them in the videos on stasis, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I think
a
you're
very
right.
with a very brief how do you call it? Rapid or
Yeah, they just got like a mention.
supercut of the of the
Yeah.
evolution. Yeah, but now we are going to cover them as fully as I am able to, and of course, again a disclaimer: I am not an expert on Pseudosuchian evolution. This is
Well, I
just
thought that's why we brought
I'm
you on.
able.
You're telling me
Yeah.
you're. Well,
This is what I'm being able to gather from the literature, and whenever I'm citing a source, I included the source on the slide, so you can look up the sources yourself.
Nesslig, I have to say, you make like the best slides for these things. I don't know how you do it, but your slides always look very nice.
I'm making it always too difficult for myself, but I just like making slides for some reason. Yeah. All right. So we can begin right now.
Well, they always look really good. So
All right. Okay. Can you can you make it also bigger for us as well, Peter? Thank you. Good. All right. So the reason why I made this is because I believe that the croc evolution is severely underrated. Like there is a certain group that has it always gets the attention. The dinosaurs always get the attention. The crocs
I
are
know
like
what's up with
sidelined.
that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Exactly.
We're just that great. I think that's all it is.
Yeah.
What's not to like?
But of course, for one time, only this once, we are going to shine the spotlight on the line leading to the crocodilians.
All right, I'll let them have
Alright.
it this time.
Yeah. All right. Next slide. And there's also one other reason. Like, there's a common misconception that crocs are like living fossils. They have never changed forever, basically. And one reason that I already explained before is that their evolution is severely underestimated. Like most people are not aware of like some relatives of crocodilians that used to exist. And another reason is that the body plan, as you may want to call them, has been adopted several times independently in the history. Like in this funny image here, you can see you have a crocodilian on the left, and you have an amphibian relative. I believe it's maybe Prianosuchus in the middle, which is an amphibian, specifically a temnospondyle, if I'm correct, a stereospondyle specifically, yes. Which is basically an amphibian trying to be a crocodile. And it does pretty much the same thing a crocodile does, like a freshwater ambush predator. And you also have a relative of the whales, cetacean on the right, Ambulocetus. Also, perhaps at a similar life strategy of waiting in the water and perhaps snatching something on land. Although I believe in the case of Ambulocetus, it probably ate mostly fish.
Hey, plenty of crocodilians today eat almost
Right.
fish, so.
Exactly. Yes, it's also true for most crocodilians as well. Yeah. All right, next slide. So before we dive deep into their evolution, we need to clarify some terms because there's often a confusion about the term crocodilian and crocodilia or crocodile and such. So to avoid any confusion, the term crocodilia is the order that refers to the all crocodilians. The members are called crocodilians, which include the alligators on the left, or the family of Alligatoridae, which includes the alligators and the caimans. In the case of the alligators, there are 2 species in 1 genus, and the caimans are 6 species in 3 genera. And then you have a second family is the Crocodilidae, not, again, different from the order Crocodilia. Crocodilidae is the family that includes the true crocodiles, about 13 and 14, or 14 species in 1 genus. There's a debate on whether 1 species should be counted as 1 species or 2 separate species. There's still, again, perhaps we will discover a new species of crocodilian or crocodile soon enough. And the same is true for the dwarf crocodiles. There's also a debate on whether there are 2 or 3 species in the genus of dwarf crocodiles. In the subfamily Osteolaeminae. And as well, we also have the slender-snouted crocodiles in their own genus, 2 species in that case. And then on the right, you have the third and the last remaining family of crocodilians, the Gavialidae, with the gharial, 1 species, 1 genus, and in the subfamily Gavialinae. And another subfamily is the Thomistominae, if I'm not pronounced correctly. I think I am. It's the false gharial, also 1 species in 1 genus. So I hope yes, that's the basic overview of how these crocodilians.
You know, Ness, I do love when taxonomists are like, we're going to name this genus Crocodilus within Crocodilinae, Crocodilidae, Crocodilia. You know?
Yeah,
I love when it's just.
You should see the Hominidae family.
Homo,
family Hominidae,
Homininae, yeah, all that crap, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it usually happens when the animal in question is the animal for which the group is named.
Right. Yeah.
In Latin, usually.
Or it'll be like fungi are the same way. It's like this is mucor in the Mucoromycetes, Mucoromycotina, and just like up on and on, up and up. It's like okay, all right, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Unless there are any other commentary on this, I believe we can go to the next slide.
I once saw I went to the zoo and I don't remember what species of caiman it was, but I looked at the sign and I thought, it can't possibly look like that because he looked like he was frowning. And then I looked at the caiman and I was like, holy crap, he does look exactly like that.
If I remember correctly, like caimans have like a bony shelf on top of their eyes. So yeah, they look like they are frowning. Yeah.
He would look like the angriest little guy.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
all right. So like in the previous slide, we saw the order Crocodilia, which is also the crown group. And again, there's another term we need to cover. The crown group includes all the living species of a given group, plus their last common ancestor, plus all the descendants of that common ancestor, including the ones that are extinct. So you have again in the image here, you see the crown group colored yellow. It includes the alligatorids, crocodilids, and the gavialids, as well as their extinct relatives. But outside the crown group, it is included into the pan group, which includes all extinct relatives of the crocodilians that are more closely related to that group. As opposed to the next closest living group to the crocodilians is the birds. That's a sister group. So anything closer related to the crocodilians are within the pan group of the crocodile or crocodilians. And the pan group has a special name. It's called the Pseudosuchia. That's the name for the pan group of crocodilians. And we also have like one up.
That we should name this group Ava Pseudosuchia? That's what it looks like.
Absolutely
not. They're combined
because I'm here. I get it. And no, we shouldn't. That's worse than Cetartiodactyla.
There's actually a group called Ornithosuchids.
Yeah, that's right. The Ornithosuchids, one of the
Yeah, but
Triassic guys.
Yeah, but they are a group of pseudosuchians. But we will get to that later on. Like one other thing to note is the term stem group. Those are that's basically the pan group minus the crown group. So and everything shaded in like a pinkish color, that's the stem group. And again, the yellow is the crown group. So unless there are any other questions or remarks on this slide, we can go to the next slide.
I was going to
it's
say, it's weird that a lot of Christians reject evolution when, if you look at the picture, most of those were Christians. Just saying.
Yeah. But
all of creation sings to God. Yeah.
Yeah.
But just to, I know it's a joke, but just to clarify, those are daggers. Those things, and they are not crosses. It's a common misconception, but they are daggers. Yeah, they are supposed to I don't know why that symbol is used. Maybe Dapper knows because he's like a linguist. maybe he knows why we use the dagger symbol.
Every time I come here, every time I am abused. So basically, that symbol was originally, if I remember correctly, used to indicate that the person whose name preceded it was deceased. And then that use got expanded into taxonomy to indicate extinct groups. So if you see a dagger after the name of the taxon, that indicates that all members of the taxon are extinct. And no, I'm not a linguist. I am a linguistics enthusiast.
Oh, that's fair. Yes.
Yeah. I'm a linguist the same way that like the guy whose hobby is like working on hot rods in his garage is a mechanic. Like it's not my job. That's not really what I'm trained for. But I do have some fun doing linguistic stuff here and there.
All right. Now, on this slide, like one point that I also want to make is that, like, people think that the crocodilians are ancient. They are ancient creatures. They've always existed, or at least they have existed for hundreds and hundreds of millions of years. But when you look at this image, I only include the the ranges of the crown groups of different. Like you have on top, you have the crown group of amphibians, then the crown group of mammals. And then we have first the lonely Tuatara in the genus Phenodon. And then next we have the crown group of lizards, including snakes. Snakes are included in the crown group of lizards. And then next we have the crown group of the turtles, including tortoises. And then again the birds next to the crocodilians. And we see that in fact, like crocodilians are actually a fairly young group compared to turtles, lizards, and especially the amphibians. Amphibians are a lot older as a crown group. So I think we can again. Any other remarks to note on this slide, perhaps?
Well,
again,
one of the reasons people tend to think that crocodilians are really ancient is there's a lot of things that are related to crocodilians and are in Pseudosuchia that if you looked at them while alive, you would probably say, gee, that looks like a crocodile. So it is true that crocodilia is a fairly recent group, but when you go into like slightly larger groups like Crocodilomorpha, whose members most people couldn't tell apart from actual true crocodilians, that goes back way farther.
Yes, that's right. Like Crocodilomorpha does go back a lot farther. Although one thing I also want to note is that even within the group Crocodilomorpha, there are also other things that are very, very different from the modern crocodilians. Yes, and we will get to those as well. So again, if there is any other remarks, just feel free to interrupt me as I go. Next slide. I'll brace yourself for the next slide. There we go.
Okay.
Now, before I only included the crown group.
Good gravy. Did you make this slide?
Yes,
Holy
I cannot tell you
crap!
how long.
You have to tell me
Yeah.
how you did that. Oh, also, from my unfinished journey, gifted one Jackson 8 memberships. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
All
just
That's-
typed what are the odds that he would gift a membership and get it himself?
I don't think you're allowed to.
It happened. It just happened.
Oh, does it? Huh.
That's
Oh, hey, congrats.
Nesslig, this is an astounding slide. Holy crap!
Yeah, I painted myself in the corner with this one because I want like really emphasize how like even just the crown groups are all we have left, and look at what we no longer have. Now we show the stem groups as well, like the extinct stem groups.
You
of
have
each
to
of
tell
the
me
crown
how you did
groups.
this. Like after the show, you have to show me how you did this.
PowerPoint, basically PowerPoint.
Okay,
It's really tedious, and I don't recommend doing this unless you love making these slides. You won't enjoy making these slides. All right. But again, I don't think we want to cover every single thing on this slide. I just want to emphasize like how much we don't have anymore.
Mhm.
Like again in the bottom left, we have the stem groups of tetrapods, like the transitional fissiopods, basically. And we also have many other stem groups on the amphibian side, as well as the mammal side as well. Again, too many to cover today. We just want to focus on the Pseudosuchia. So in the next slide, we will zoom in on that group, Pseudosuchians. The next slide, yes. So there we go. That's the pan group of the crocodilians. The Pseudosuchians are the stem groups are shaded in red, and the crown group is shaded in yellow. So again, this is basically their unique evolution, spanning the first starting in the start of the Mesozoic, and then of course ending up today. And as Depa mentioned before, even within the stem groups, you also have things that are very crocodile-like, although they are very different. Again, still far removed from the modern crocodilians. Like as I mentioned a few slides ago, the crocodile body was basically adopted by many different groups independently, even within the Pseudosuchian group. That's lifestyle of ambush, aquatic ambush predator, or like that has been adopted many times independently. But also we have also many other things as well within these groups, including very interestingly very different from the crocodilians that you know today, and we will see them as well later on. All right. Any other remarks on this, perhaps?
Nothing other than holy crap.
Oh, yes, I know. It only gets worse from here. Next slide. All right, so I was really questioning myself of where to really begin the evolution. So do I begin at the base of crocodilian of the pan group, Pseudosuchia, or do I go back even further? And I eventually chose to start at the point where our line diverged from that of the crocodilians. So here you can see in the left side, you see a split, the main split happening within the group Amniote. On the top, you have the synapsid lineage, which is basically the mammal pan group. So mammals, including all their extinct relatives, are on the top side. And if you go to the bottom side, you see the pan group of reptiles, the Sauropsida. That's the pan group of reptiles, including crocodilians, of course. And like one thing that we have in common with the crocodilians is being included in the Amniote group. We have the amnion, basically a layer of a membrane surrounding, like within the egg. You have a membrane called the amnion that surrounds the embryo, which fish and amphibians don't have, but reptiles and mammals also do have the amnion. And you can see that highlighted in red, the name amnion in red there. Oh, we have also a super chat.
Okay. My unfinished journey for $6.66. Hail Nero, Hail Jax, Daps and Ness, and Hail Salubrious Pseudosuchians. I like that with the silent P and salubrious. Thank you.
Yes. Also, one thing I like to do is when I go into the fossil record, I want to look at two groups that are like today are very different from another. Like mammals are very different from the group of reptiles, of course. But when you go back and look at the earliest, like or one of the earliest relatives of the pan group mammals and the pan group reptiles, you can see two examples of those on the bottom right. You see on the left there is a Petrolacosaurus. It's an early diapsid, an early member of the pan group reptiles. And on the right, you have an early synapsid, an early member of the pan group mammals. And one of the only differences that you have in this case is the number of holes in the skull. The synapsids have like one hole in the skull, and the diapsids have two holes in the skull. And even then, that's not. It turns out that's not completely consistent. The number of holes in the skull tends to be more complicated in reality. Like if you want to know more about that, you can go on to the GEOL 431 website. Like on the on the website of the University of Maryland, GEOL 431, they go very deeply into this discussion.
Biology do be variable. That is, it's if nothing else, it is its signature characteristic. Is that it changes.
And
Can't pin it down.
you have like one group called the Veranopid. They are traditionally believed to be synapsids, but they in some recent studies put them in the sauropsid side. Again, it's basically, I believe, it's basically like the number of holes in the skull was one of the the first things that the paleontologists really noticed. Like, oh yeah, this is a clear difference. But now, as we know more, the holes in the skull is not 100% reliable to distinguish between the two groups. And that's expected, right? Because the further back you go, the more difficult it is to distinguish between two lines that just separated from one another. Yeah.
It's almost like evolution is true.
Right?
Exactly.
That's crazy, dog. Yeah.
Who'd have thought?
We covered the split between sauropsids and synapsids in the lava lizard's tail. For anyone who's curious about learning more, that sort of stuff. My unfinished sock for $2. Don't make a Cayman frown. Like and share instead. Very true.
Yes, please do.
You guys need to like and share this video.
You could share and like if that's your preference.
But you're going to like and share. In that order.
Yes.
Because I'm in charge here.
Oh.
All right. All right, next slide. So within the reptile side, you have like again different groups. First, you have the pan group sauropsid. A subset of that is the diapsid, and a subset of that is the neo-diapsid, the new diapsid, so to speak. And then within that, you have the crown group reptiles, Sauria, all the way on the bottom right there. And like one of the things that I want to highlight is the shared trait among crown reptiles is they share water conserving traits. They have like waterproof skin, reinforced with beta carotene, which mammals don't have. We have alpha carotene, if I'm correct, right? We have alpha carotene.
Yes.
But the reptiles have both alpha and beta carotene.
Right.
And their skin, and also their skin has very few glands. Like people tend to think that snakes are like slimy. They don't want to hold them because they think they are slimy. No, you're the one who is slimy compared to the snake.
Correct.
Yes.
Their skin is usually characterized as aglandular, which is not always entirely accurate, but generally speaking, the skin of reptiles tends not to have much in the way of glandular structures.
Right. And it's also shown in the way they secrete nitrogen waste. When you go to your thing in the bathroom, you excrete urea as your main way of to excrete nitrogen waste. Like most life, or fish, for example, they can secrete nitrogen waste as ammonia through their gills. But the problem is that ammonia is very toxic, and you need to use a lot of water to secrete ammonia. And fish do that by using the ocean, basically, going through their gills to secrete the ammonia as waste. And they don't use their kidneys. The kidneys in fish, by and large, are not used to secrete nitrogen waste. They are used to homeostasis regarding the salinity content of their blood. Osmoregulation, basically. That's why we also use our kidneys to do osmoregulation, of course. But our kidneys has been adopted to also function as the organ that excretes the nitrogen waste as urea. But reptiles, by and large, also are specialized to secrete the nitrogen as a even lower toxic substance called uric acid. And uric acid is even less toxic than uric acid, so they can secrete uric acid with even less water. But the downside is it takes more energy to secrete uric acid. So it's like a trade-off between energy and water use.
It's almost like life is full of trade-offs.
Yes.
True.
Yes.
My Unfinished Journey gifted a Jackson Wheat membership to
Yes.
does anybody else want to attempt to pronounce that? I have no idea how to pronounce that. I am so sorry.
All right.
I do not know how to pronounce this. I can put it here in our private chat. Does our resident lingual enthusiast?
Well, I mean, for one thing, I'm not sure what language we're coming from here, but let's see. Conceptuora is going to be my guess there.
Okay. Well, Icarus said let Dapper pronounce it. There you go. We got Dapper to pronounce it.
Kinda.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
I mean, it was mostly a guess, but you know. So yeah, that's one of the things. Is like, you could be an actual PhD linguist if you come across a spelling convention from a language you're just not familiar with. You're not going to do any better than anyone else.
It is Proto-Uralic.
Oh. Well, I don't know any Uralic languages. Never mind their Proto-Uralic roots. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Keep going, Nesslig.
No worries. But yeah, like reptiles as a group are able to secrete the nitrogen waste as a paste, basically. Like you have probably seen bird poop, but actually the white stuff you see is not poop. It's
basically
pee,
the urine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the urine. Yeah.
And lizards have the same basic kind of poop.
Yeah. It's a very efficient way to conserve water, and these traits basically point to the likelihood that reptiles were specialized for to survive in very dry environments. Next slide.
It's probably why they did so well in the Triassic.
Right, exactly. So that's exactly the point that I going to make here. Like during the Carboniferous and early Middle Permian, it was actually very cold during those times. You have like the Earth was in a ice house condition. It's also called the Karoo Ice Age, if I'm not mistaken, or also called the late Paleozoic Ice House, which started from the end Devonian, and it stopped right before the end Permian extinction event, and right around the end Permian, that's when Earth became very hot again. The ice caps melted, and Earth became like in some regions it was also very dry as well. And also, and that dry conditions, as Tepper mentioned, that those dry conditions also continued after the extinction event through the Triassic, and that's probably the reason why reptiles really went bonkers after the extinction event. You can also see here, there's also one interesting thing that I have found, is that if you look at the late Permian fossil record, and you see the latitude distribution of different groups, stem group reptiles and also crown group reptiles tend to be restricted to the equator, basically. Which is also what we expect from the previous slide. They probably were very specialized to survive very hot and dry conditions in the equator. And that's also one sad thing about this is the reason that the fossil record from the equatorial region is very poor. Like we don't, as you can see in the top left image, that's from a website called Paleo Database or paleobiodatabase.org, and you can
Very cool
look
website.
at the and you can find very easy to find fossil locations from all over the world. And the image that you see right there is the fossil record or fossil sites from the late Permian. And you can see here that there aren't many dots in the equator region. So we have a lot of fossils from the high latitude on the top and the bottom, but not a lot in the middle. And the frustrating is that that's where the reptiles were, and that's also the reason why we unfortunately don't have a lot of fossils of reptiles, especially the crown reptiles. A crown group, late Permian reptiles are very rare. We have a lot of mammals or mammal relatives in the late Permian, but they lived on the high latitudes where we do have a lot of fossil record from. So yeah. All right, next slide.
Okay.
But then after the extinction event, reptiles just basically took over all over the world. The hot and dry conditions allowed them to flourish, basically, and they ruled the earth, as we always say. Mm-hmm. But there's also one group here that I want to highlight. You can also see in the left, you see them highlighted as yellow. It's called again, I don't know exactly how you pronounce these. I'm trying. Corystodera.
That's how I would pronounce it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Corystodera. Yeah. The name basically refers to their neck vertebrae, I believe. They're a very enigmatic group of reptiles. And their phylogeny has always been uncertain. And they are either stem saurians or stem group reptiles or stem group Lepidosauromorphs or stem group Archosauromorphs. Regardless of where they fall in the reptile phylogeny, they appear to be a very ancient group, and they also survived until fairly recently, about 11 million years ago or so. And they also have adopted the crocodile-like body plan.
Although I'll point out that after the KPG, their diversity was not doing too well during the Cenozoic.
Yeah, it's also like their fossil record doesn't start until basically we have very certain fossils from the mid-Jurassic, but very disputed fossils from the Triassic. So that's a very, again, as you mentioned, there's a very, very uncertain or very few fossil members known early on. So they probably, unless there's some bias in their distribution, perhaps they were very rare even then. They were maybe struggling to survive, and then they somehow managed to linger on until the the Miocene.
Yeah, that
Basically,
seems like what it is based on what I've seen. But then again, it's not like I'm a Chrysodaran expert.
Yeah. Like this is a one group you almost never hear about. Yeah.
Yeah, aside from the one guy, Champsosaurus. Aside from him, yeah, I don't really know any other ones. So
Yeah.
There were some in the Hell Creek Formation. So they lived alongside, Triceratops and T-Rex and Edmontosaurus and all your favorite Montana dinosaurs.
Yeah. It's also sad that they didn't survive because they did. Again, it's 11 million years ago. It's like
to walk in the park.
not. Yeah,
Missed
it's
it by
not
that much.
that much. Yeah, there was this. It was so close. All right. Next slide. So now we move into the again the group, basically the pan group of archosaurs. Archosaur, like perhaps explaining what archosaur means. Archosaurs is basically the group that includes both the crocodilians and the birds. And Archosauromorpha is the pan group of the archosaurs. So everything closer to the birds and the crocodiles than they are to lizards and snakes are included in the archosaurs. So everything closer to the crocodile and birds are archosaurs, or archosauromorphs specifically. And here is one early group of archosauromorphs from the Permian, like one of the few Permian crown group reptiles that we do know of is Protorosaurus. And basically, again, it's again one of those things. The further back in time you go, the more difficult it is to distinguish between different groups. So one of the only things that we allow us to distinguish between the early Archosauromorphs and the early Lepidosauromorphs, also a new term. Lepidosauromorphs are the group that includes the squamates, the lizards, and snakes and tuataras, basically. And one of the things that allow us to distinguish between Archosauromorphs and Lepidosauromorphs is that the Archosauromorphs have longer necks with long overlapping cervical ribs. That's one of the main differences between the Archosauromorphs and the Lepidosauromorphs early on.
Okay. Something pretty simple. It's always like once you kind of get down to the base, it's always some very small morphological difference. Because they're very close to common ancestor. We did that in all of our videos on like the evolution of mammals. It was always like this group has a shelf on the back of their tooth that the other group doesn't have, and that's how you tell monotremes from therians. So
or like the early relatives between horses and rhinos and tapirs. That's also one of my favorite. The only difference. Yeah, the only difference between the early relatives of horses, rhinos, and tapirs are the teeth. That's the only way to tell them apart. Yeah. Very, very minute differences, All right. But as time goes on, of course, the Archosauromorphs become very different from the Lepidosaurs. All right, next slide. And as I mentioned before, one main difference was that the Archosauromorphs had slightly longer necks, while some Archosauromorphs took that to an extreme. You have the called the Tanisaurians, like Tanistropheus and also other. They developed extremely elongated necks, very long indeed. And some of them also did it independently. You can see in the images below, you see like on the top you have called, I'm trying to read it, Trachyleosaurus, and then you have another genus, Dinocephalosaurus, or Dinocephalosaurus. The top two are more closely related to each other, and the bottom two are more closely related to each other. So what this shows is that the ones in the middle, they elongated their necks independently from one another, basically. It's a convergent evolution to extremely elongated necks.
Is this like there wasn't like allometric scaling involved or anything like that?
I'm not sure. Like I did give one citation in the bottom right there. Like my citations are always in the bottom right.
Hmm.
Those
Oh.
are my citations in these slides. Yeah. Like I'm not sure why they tend to elongate. Like it probably has to do with their feeding style. So I
Yeah,
think they
usually.
That's my best guess. Like they probably relied on their long necks to like fish for something. Yeah, maybe it's the same thing. Probably happened also in the plesiosaurs, but the plesiosaurs are not closely related to these, at least as far as I'm aware of.
A long neck morphology is something that evolves fairly
Yeah.
regularly, and it seems to pretty much always have something to do with feeding, although not always the same food items, right? So like sauropods and giraffes both independently evolved long neck morphology, probably for high browsing.
Right.
Whereas like that's not why Tanystropheus did it.
Nope. And I also believe they are semi-aquatic as well, so they probably swam in the maybe in this. I'm not sure. Do you know if they are marine or freshwater?
So
I'm not
the
sure.
last I heard on Tanystropheus feeding and habits was that it was probably a near-shore feeder, and that what it did was it would stay near the shoreline, basically, and then feed on fish as it saw them from above the water. So it's sort of like more like a stork type feeding.
Yeah.
Like a heron almost. Yeah.
Yeah, like a heron. Yeah.
Okay.
Although herons will wade into the water, whereas Tanystropheus seems like it didn't, because the thing is, we find Tanystropheus associated with like lacustrine and like fluvial deposits, which indicates that they were probably hanging out near rivers. Which, okay, yeah, sure, but they don't seem to have any adaptations for swimming, right? Like if you look at their legs, like they have short legs that don't seem like they would be very good for swimming. The tail is not particularly long or broad. So the question becomes, okay, so what are you doing near the shore with this ridiculously long neck, but also few to no adaptations for swimming? And so what it seems like is probably hanging out at the shore, pushing your head over, like the art shows, right?
Okay.
Yeah, but Mark P. Ritten's art is a very, very good artist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I was on the impression, like from the image below with the you see the scuba diver for scale. I was on the impression that they were probably swimming, but maybe they are not. If you are correct, they are probably not, or maybe they did swim, but they probably did not like chase down.
Probably not.
Fish.
I mean, did Tanystropheus ever end up in the water and as a result have to swim? Yeah, almost certainly, right? That happens to most animals. And it probably happened a lot to Tanystropheus. But was that their preferred like method of locomotion? Is that something they wanted to be doing a lot? No, probably not.
So sounds like the debate on Spinosaurus. It's the same debate,
to some extent. Although, to be fair, it does seem like there's more evidence for swimming behavior in Spinosaurus, just because it has like the broadened tail, it has the reduced limbs. There are some things about it that seem to indicate aquaticness in a way that's not true for Tanystropheus. But then again, who knows?
Yeah. All right. We can do unless on any other commentaries, we can go to the next slide. All right, next slide. So the next, like a subgroup of archosauromorphs is called the crocopoda, or crocodile feet, and that refers to a unique extension of the calcaneus or calcaneus, however you pronounce it. Is it the S? Calcaneus, yes. The heel bone, basically.
Yep.
Yeah. And they have like a tuber-like extension of that heel bone called the calcaneal tuber, and that it's an attachment point for a large flexor muscle. So this allows the crocopods to have like explosive movements, basically, probably for ambushing prey or something, or running away from predators, perhaps. Yeah. And also one thing to note is that this tuber became very prominent in the Pseudosuchians, but this tuber was reduced and eventually lost within the avian metatarsalia, which is the group, the pan group of birds, the avian metatarsalia, the pan group of birds. All right, so next slide. And here's some more examples of different groups of crocopods. You have the perhaps again, it's a very very uncertain placement of this group called the Tyrannosauromorphs, or also called the monkey lizards. I've seen them called before.
Because of their
very,
prehensile
very
tail, yeah.
yes, but of course the placement is very uncertain. Like this is one recent. Like I found. I should have included the citation. I think I included citation on the left. Can you Buffa et al. That's the citation that I have recently seen. A very recent paper from last year. They placed the trypanosaurs within the Allocotosaurians. But of course, all alternative placements are they may be even stem reptiles, like outside the crown group Sauria. There's also one other place for the trypanosaurs.
For anybody who's curious as to like why there are so many groups that are like kind of hard to place, is when you have these really big evolutionary radiations where organisms are like filling all the open niches that were left as a result of the Permian Triassic mass extinction. The differences between them at first are very slight, and so you have like all these different groups that are all expanding into different niches, and so because they're all really similar to each other at first, it gets really difficult to figure out who's most closely related to who, and then who diverged from what and when. And there's even been debate within the like the dinosaur community about like for a long time we had the Ornithischia Saurischia divide, and that's kind of come into question in more recent years about like, okay, well, what about was it the Herrerasaurids, I think? Like, are they actually theropods, or are they like early sauropodomorphs? And so like, yeah.
I will say the Ornithischia plus theropods being one clade to the exclusion of sauropods, which is the alternate hypothesis that was proposed a few years back, and that has, people are paying attention to. It hasn't been doing a whole lot to convince most vertebrate paleontologists. So right now, the consensus is still that Ornithischia and Saurischia are valid groups.
Gotcha.
But, I mean, that could still change. I mean, the studies that recover
Ornithocelida, isn't it?
Oh yeah,
Ornithoscelida,
yeah. They're not like terrible studies. It's just that most people, I believe, are recovering different phylogenies. So yeah, right now I would say you feel free to stick with Saurischia and Ornithischia as the two twin groups. And as far as Herrerasaurus, its placement is unclear. It's not clear if it is a theropod, if it might be a sauropodomorph. It could actually even be a stem ornithischian. We're just not really sure.
Oh, isn't there also a debate over like whether the Silosaurids are like stem ornithischians or
right now most. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm not go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted.
Oh, so most studies recover them as dinosauromorphs.
Right.
But it could be that they're actually they share a common ancestor with ornithischians that's more recent than they do with theropods, which would make them dinosaurs and would make them
right.
Yeah, sort of like stem ornithischian, which is a weird word because technically there are no crown ornithischians.
But sure. That's. I
Mhm.
mean, there it would be. Yeah.
But like they lack the diagnostic
Yeah.
features of ornithischians. However, they might still be closer to them than they are to theropods, which would make them something like a stem ornithischian.
Right, and
Yeah.
it's also odd because like there's like a single ornithischian known from the Triassic, and that's like Pisanosaurus.
Yeah.
And it's like, where the heck are all the other ornithischians? Well, if it turns out that silosaurids are them, then it's like, oh, well, there they are.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah.
the thing that gets confusing, right, is our earliest known definitive ornithischians. They have a bone called the predentary bone, right?
Mhm.
Which is a unique bone that is in front of the dentary bones, and it supported a beak, a keratinous beak, on the bottom jaw, which was usually opposed by a keratinous beak on the top jaw that covers the premaxilla. But like the weird thing is, okay, so they had to evolve that at some point,
Right.
which means their
Right.
earliest ancestors after the split with other dinosaurs didn't have it. So how would we recognize something as an ornithischian if
Without
it
the
doesn't have the
predentary.
one thing
Right.
that makes something an ornithischian? Yeah, and it's a hard question to answer. And I mean, people are working on it, and I don't expect that to be resolved anytime soon. But who knows? Maybe we're going to find some amazing new fossils that'll clear it all up.
Yeah.
That's
It's-
right.
it's-
We get a
it's
half
basically-
predentary bone, you know.
Yeah. And
But only
this
the
is
left
like
half.
this is one downside of like paleontology. Like you're always dealing with like what are a very, very small sample size of what
Mhm.
used to be there. Like if you're a zoologist studying like a fairly common species of bird, you have like, oh, I have so many data points, but then in the fossil
Or-
record you have like
A beetle.
very often or be or an entomologist, even better, an entomologist.
Oh,
yeah.
I was just
So
saying
many-
that
so
because
many-
that's what I did my master's thesis on was.
Yeah. Yeah, but then in the fossil, so often you're dealing with fragmentary remains of a single species. All you have is just a fragmentary remain in most cases. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, we
And
have
and
these nice reconstructions, but the actual bones that we have are usually a fraction of what you would see in a full skeleton.
Mhm.
hmm
Often
And
less
even
protected.
though we have mostly fragmentary remains, it's very astonishing that we still have such a vibrant picture of like, look at this, look at the Archosaurians. Like you have like Rhynchosaur, how do you call it? Rhynchosaurus with the horns.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a weird
That's
word.
very neat. Yeah, it's a very
Yeah.
weird.
A weird word
Weird
for a
animal.
weird guy.
Yeah. And also notice the in the not as extreme as the Dinosaurians, but still fairly elongated necks, right? In the Allogotosaurians as well. They tend
Yeah,
to have these
Rhynchosaurus has a
longer
long
necks.
neck. Yeah, he has a pretty long neck there. It's kind of
Yeah.
odd.
And that's a trend in the early Archosauromorphs. But later members reduced their necks to like normal-ish size. So yeah. Next. Unless any other remarks, we can go to the next slide. All right, next slide. So this is like one example of where the Archosauromorphs have like reduced the necks to a more normal-ish size. It's the Rhynchosaurs. And these are very neat looking animals. They were among the most common herbivores in the early Triassic. And they have a very peculiar arrangements of their jaws. Like in the image that you see below. Those are not those protrusions are not the teeth. They are the actual jaws. Like the tip is the premaxilla and the bottom is basically a groove within the dentary where the premaxilla beak almost can fit inside. It's a very weird arrangement. The only similar thing is probably the Tuatara has something, but not very close. Still not close than this. This is a very extreme.
You could argue it's similar to
shape,
Dunkleosteus from a very long time before.
Yeah, it's also something you can remind yourself of. Yeah, it's a very extreme shape among the premaxilla, almost turning it into a beak. Yeah, and they probably ate tubers of like horsetails or something like that. Yeah. And I also have in the art below, you also have a metapodosaurid, a stem group amphibian, lurking in the water right there. Yeah. All right. So, any other remarks on the Rhynchosaurs?
I don't think so.
All right. Next slide. So now, within the crocopods, you have this subgroup called the archosauriformes, which are the so-called advanced archosauromorphs. And here we have like a few key transitions. The archosauriformes are characterized by having serrated teeth in deep sockets, this is called the thecodont condition, having teeth in sockets. You also have an additional hole in the skull called the mandibular fenestra, a hole in the lower jaw, as well as a antorbital fenestra, a hole in front of the eye socket. And also you have a closed lower temporal bar. So you have four unique traits that characterizes the Archosauriformes. But here you have like one transitional species, again, trying to pronounce this, Tu Yagua. That's a genus. And this genus shows two traits of Archosauriformes, but lacking the other two traits. So it has the mandibular fenestra and also the serrated teeth in sockets, but it lacked the antorbital fenestra and the closed lower temporal bone. So it has a mixture of advanced, quote unquote, advanced and basal features. Another good transitional fossil that we have.
That can't be right because I was told there are no transitional fossils. So
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Yeah.
By a guy who just had his third YouTube channel nuked.
Good.
And who had his fourth marriage nuked too.
Womp womp.
Ooh. Oh, wrong. Yeah, and this is also probably the point where the Archosauromorphs became very, very predatory. Like they have like a serrated teeth deep in sockets, and maybe I'm not sure. I would guess that the mandibular fenestra allows for more attachment points for muscles, allowing them a very, very quick, strong bite. That's my guess. Maybe do you know anything about the mandibular fenestra, Dapper?
So my understanding is that it does not have a whole lot of muscle attachment points, and so generally speaking, the consensus has been that at least in most forms, it seems to have just been a weight-saving measure that didn't significantly weaken the jaw because it allowed for like arches that are relatively strong for relatively lightweight. And so, yeah, it seems like it's mostly a weight-saving feature, which makes sense given that we also see it closing up in aquatic archosaurs like crocodilians, who have small or closed in some forms fenestrae generally in terms of the skull. So, yeah, probably weight-saving. But then again, I mean, it's possible there are other things going on there. Because, like with everything in paleontology, we don't have all the data we would like because, well, we pretty much only have skeletons, and even then, they are incomplete.
All right. Next slide. So one thing I did know about the antorbital fenestra is like in one paper, it shows that this antorbital fenestra is associated with a sinus involved in thermoregulation. So like, for an example of an Allosaurus on the right, which has a very large sinus associated with the antorbital fenestra. And you also have similar things happening in like birds and crocodilians as well. Also, do crocodilians have an antorbital fenestra anymore, or maybe
not as
it's also closed? Not as adults, yeah.
Yeah, it forms embryonically and it closes up.
Interesting. Okay.
That's true for a lot of things like that in evolution.
Oh, I mean, yeah, our inner ear bones, the malleus and the incus, start out as jawbone condensations and then move up into the ear. That's super weird. They don't just form in the ear. That's so odd. I wonder why that might be. It's crazy.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
Oh well,
Very
probably no
odd
reason.
indeed.
It's probably just a goof
Yeah.
from the intelligent designer.
Correct.
Sometimes the guy's a goof.
He's just a little guy, you know.
Yeah, it's doing funny little things that don't make a whole lot of sense outside of evolution. You know.
Yeah, you know,
Mhm.
happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
Also, additional features of the archosauriforms is that they members can adopt a semi-erect posture, like not fully erect as you can see in like a birds or mammals, but you can see them
Happens
having
to
a
7 in 10
yeah.
sauropsids. You know.
yeah. They can adopt a semi-erect posture, like an intermediate between the sprawling of lizards and the erect of birds, basically, and dinosaurs. They also have interlocking gastralia, which has been associated with improved respiration with using these interlocking gastralia. Also, curiously, this is the point where we see the loss of the pineal foramen. Basically, the hole in the middle of the skull, where you have what's called the pineal eye, or the third eye, as sometimes called. Like many lizards have this third eye, and they use it to for the circadian rhythm. I believe it is also functioning to adjust to the day-night cycle, and also used to do to regulate their body temperature in a conjunction with the day and night cycle, of course. And it's also where we see the archosauriformes. Like there are some studies regarding bone histology of fossils, and bone histology shows that archosauriformes have fast growth rates. So again, this is one thing that is very difficult to figure out. But these things of thermoregulation, the loss of the pineal eye, improved breathing, are we seeing like high metabolic rates, maybe even endothermy in this case? So there's some possibilities perhaps in this point of Archosauromorph. Like it's also interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say one interesting thing is that the number of heart chambers often corresponds closely to level of ability to control body temperature. And crocodilians actually have 4 chambers, but they bypass one of them to give them a more effectively lizard-like heart. But then there's always that question, okay, so why do you have a 4-chambered heart that you don't use? Maybe the ancestors of crocodilians, who are, cold-blooded, might not have been cold-blooded. And they're
really
4-chambered heart. Yeah.
That is really neat.
Exactly.
I never thought about that way. That is really interesting. A reversion to the ancestral character of ectothermy. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's probably like I believe that is almost pretty much a consensus that the ancestors to the crocodilians were a lot more active and a lot more.
I mean, we know
and endothermic compared to the modern crocodilians. Yeah, so it
we know
appears that the
they
modern
were at least-
crocodilians have cooled down. Yeah.
We know they were at least very much more active because a lot of them have like a lot of cursorial adaptations and
Right.
whatnot.
Bipeds and
Right.
You can't be cursorial and inactive. Like those are contradictory. In case anyone's wondering, cursorial means adapted for running.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, like one thing that they've, like you mentioned, the 4th-chambered heart. One thing with the 4th-chambered heart is it separates the pulmonary circulation from the systemic circulation, and it allows you to have a very different blood pressure regarding the blood that reaches the lungs compared to the blood that reaches all over the body. And that's very important, because if you have a very high blood pressure reaching the lungs, that's dangerous. You can have because the lungs are very fragile, they have very thin membranes, of course. So by separating the two from each other, you can have a high blood pressure throughout your body while having a low blood pressure regarding the blood that reaches your lungs. And,
Yep.
having a high blood pressure throughout your whole body is important if you are standing upright. You may have noticed that if you have been lying down for a long time in your bed and then you suddenly get out of bed, standing upright, you may feel a bit dizzy. And that's the reason why, is because your blood pressure has changed very suddenly, so you feel a bit dizzy. So your heart has to compensate by slightly increasing your blood pressure again, so your blood can reach your brain again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Also, the lungs of crocodilians, and we don't know exactly, how this applies to fossil groups, but extant crocodilians, like birds, have lungs where there's unidirectional airflow, so that the air with the oxygenated and the unoxygenated air really only mix right at the nostrils, and if they bother to breathe with their mouth, which is much more efficient than the mammal-style lung.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I should also note is that, like, around, like, we are still, like, Archosauriformes is still in the late Permian. Like, we have some Archosauriformes members in the late Permian, and around the same time, you have a stem group of mammals called the cynodonts. Also, mammals are also cynodonts, but we also have cynodont relatives in the late Permian, and they also lost. Like, they also have similar traits. They also lost the pineal eye, or the pineal foramen as well. And they also have signs of a diaphragm, the cynodonts. So they also have improved breathing, and the cynodonts also have, like, the semi-erect posture as well. So maybe we see, like, a parallel evolution where the cynodonts evolved higher metabolic rates, as well as the Archosauriformes also evolved in higher metabolic rates at the same time in the late Permian. Very interesting. All right.
It's a good time to be active.
Yeah. Next time. Next slide. And here are some examples of basal lineages within the Archosauriformes. You have a recent species called Triopticus, which has, like, a dome on its head, almost like a pachycephalosaur. Not the same, of course, but it's a very, very curious dome. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Also, a few other examples. Like, on the top right, you see the transitional species that I previously mentioned. You also have Proterosuchus as well. And then a curious group of Archosauriformes are the Erythrosuchidae, such as Carjania or Carjania, which has a very cartoonishly oversized head relative to the whole body. It's very, very odd proportions if you look at the Carjania on the bottom right there. So almost certainly predatory. Yeah, almost certainly. All right, next slide. So, and then the next subgroup we encounter is called the Eucrocopoda, or true crocodile feet. And they are characterized by the following traits. Their hind legs are much larger than their front legs, relatively speaking. The femur has also an inturned head, so that the head of the femur turns inward into the hip socket. They also have a fourth trochanter, which is an attachment point for the caudofemoralis muscle. And I highlighted that in the top right image. You can see, like, two muscles attached to the tail, and also attaching to the femur. And the dot, the red dot, that's the fourth trochanter, a ridge on the femur for the attachment of the tail muscles. And they also are capable of both facultative bipedality and erect stance. Like you have a very curious animal called Eupacaria. It's believed that this was able to walk on two legs from time to time at least. Maybe when it needed to run very fast, it could run on two legs, perhaps. We also have Permian footprints of eucrocopods as well.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So unless any other commentary, perhaps do you know anything about Eupacaria, Jackson or Dapper?
My extent of knowledge about Euparkeria is that it represents something like what the common ancestor of
Yeah.
dinosaurs and crocodilians may have looked like. That's pretty much it. I've run into it like a handful of times, but I don't really know a whole lot about it. No.
All right, next slide. And there's one other group of eucrocopods called the Proterochampsa, and here are some examples of those. And they also some of them are also very, very crocodile-like, with a very crocodile-like body plan, basically. Another instance of a group that has independently adopted the same lifestyle, basically. And you see on the bottom another very good artwork by Gabriel Ugueto. I hope I pronounce his name correctly.
Great paleo artist, by the way.
Yeah, he does awesome
very
stuff.
fantastic paleo artist, yes. And here you have he has drawn a Proterochampsa, or two of them hunting down I think it's a stereospondyle, like it reminds me of Kulasuchus. It reminds me of Kulasuchus, basically. Yeah. A stem group amphibian.
We have a question from the audience. Have you considered that those oversized heads were used to chomp very big watermelons?
I had not considered that, no. One of the big reasons is because there were no flowering plants, let alone specifically watermelons.
But there were in the garden, obviously.
Well, okay, but the problem with that is that the garden less existed than didn't.
That's one way of putting it, yeah.
Yeah, it was more mythical than
I see.
real.
Okay,
right.
Well then I see.
Yeah, so
All right.
you know.
Happens to
All
the
right,
best of us.
Next slide. So now we have finally reached the crown group of Archosauria, which is also named Archosauria. That name means ruling reptiles in Greek. It's Greek, right? Yes, Archosauria is Greek. And that, as I mentioned before, this crown group includes the two extant sister groups, one leading to the birds and one leading to the crocs. And it's also, again, one thing that I did before regarding the synapsids and the sauropsids. If you trace the bird line and the croc ancestral line backwards, the closer you get to the common ancestor, the more similar they are to each other. And here's another beautiful example of this. Early members of the pan group Pseudosuchia are very similar to the early members of the pan group of birds called the Metatarsalia. So here I have labeled each of these members, but if I removed the labels, you wouldn't be able to tell which are the pan group crocs and which are within the pan group birds. You can see here that the top two are yeah. But I am. All right.
I am skilled in the ways.
Yeah.
I know my relatives when I see them.
Yeah. So
are they from your side of the family?
I mean, the ornithodyrans or Avametatarsallians are.
That was a line from a Corpse Bride. Are they from your side of the family?
I do remember that line. It's a good movie. I haven't seen it in a very long time though.
So all of the members that you see here are from the Triassic. You have like three three dinosauromorphs. No, sorry, two dinosauromorphs. Like even I cannot able, even I'm not able to distinguish all them. But on the top you have the dinosauromorphs, and you also have a scleromaculus, probably a pterosauromorph, or perhaps a dinosauromorph. There's also a debate on exactly where scleromaculus belongs. But then on the bottom and on the middle, you have Terrestrisuchus and Hesperosuchus. So these are crocodilomorphs. Again, so very, very subtle differences between these 5 members. So basically, the early archosaurians were relatively small, facultatively bipedal, and cursorial. They probably could run fairly fast. So that's very, very different from what crocodilians are today, and also very different from what birds are today. So this is again a common misconception, especially creationists have when imagining a transitional species between the crocodiles and the birds. They often go, "Oh, a crocodile is what we should expect to find in the fossil record." Like, no, crocodiles and birds are very, very distant cousins of each other, and the common ancestor of both were very different from what both are today, as you can see here.
You know, Nesslig, I wonder if the guy who wrote like the first, the book that is traditionally considered the first book on evolution, if he like explicitly addressed that exact argument. I wonder if he explicitly addressed that exact argument and said, that's not how you think about common ancestry.
Okay, but counterpoint, maybe Anatosuchus is exactly the crocodile that we were all told to look for.
Oh, that's true. That is true. You got me there.
Right.
So, maybe the creationists were right, and we still have the crocodile anyway.
We sure do.
All right. Next slide. And this is also something that I mentioned before. So like living archosaurs, both birds and crocodilians have what's called unidirectional breathing. So you can see here in the image on the left, you have the crocodile lungs, where you see as you see air flowing into the dorsal bronchi, and then passing through little structures called parabronchi, denoted as with P, and then flowing into the ventral bronchi, and then being passed, exiting again through the esophagus. And the same thing happens, or similar thing happens in birds as well on the right hand side. You see, not the exact same structures, but you see also the presence of parabronchi, where air flows only in one direction. So unidirectional breathing. Like birds do have a different system compared to crocodilians. Like crocodilians have, they pump air using their hepatic piston, basically. They use their liver to push against their lungs.
Yeah.
But birds have air sacs which do not perform gas exchange. So basically what birds do is they use the air sacs to pump air through their bronchi, which do not inflate or deflate. So in birds, air pumping and respiration are decoupled from each other, and this allows birds to have very thin membranes to have very efficient blood-gas barrier exchange, very efficient exchange between the air and their blood.
I mean, they're largely decoupled. They do still need to pump air to breathe, and if you prevent them from doing so, they will suffocate. But they're fairly disconnected, and also birds have a very distributed system that moves air around. For instance, just moving their limbs can compress and contract, or compress and expand various air sacs that can itself then give them the air flow that they need.
Right. Like I believe, like I remember, I don't remember who told the story, but there was like somebody who was trying to drown a goose, and it just wouldn't drown. Like no matter how long the guy kept it underwater. It just didn't it just didn't drown, basically.
Yep.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, it was because it actually had a compound fracture of the wing,
Oh yeah.
and
yeah.
it was actually able to breathe through one of the air sacs in the wing, because
Sheesh.
birds, like many dinosaurs, have very extensive air sacs in their limbs that
Mhm.
are connected
Yeah.
to the whole pulmonary system.
But remember that the crocs don't have air sacs, and I also don't believe any fossil relative of crocs ever shows evidence of air sacs. But they do
I'm
have
not aware of any,
yeah.
but yeah.
But they do have unidirectional breathing as well. It's also interesting to note that I believe also it has been found that some varanids and also iguanas show evidence of unidirectional breathing. This is also like something I remember, perhaps. So maybe unidirectional breeding is far more extensive among reptiles, but we need more research on that. So if you want to make a name for yourself in herpetology, go dissecting some lungs of
Yeah.
many different reptiles and see if unidirectional breeding is much more common among reptiles. And
I
it may also
personally,
yeah.
sorry.
Okay, no, go
I
ahead, sorry.
personally think that it probably convergently evolved in some lizards and in archosaurs.
Yeah.
I can't prove it, and I'm not going to write a paper about that. But the fact that it's fairly uncommon in squamata, whereas it's basically universal across Archosauria,
Yeah.
makes me suspect that it's a convergent trait across some lepidosaurs. But also, it's possible that lepidosaurs, for some reason, just lost that as part of their evolutionary history. I don't know what
Mhm.
pressures would cause you to
Mhm.
lose unidirectional airflow. That seems weird, but like lots of things are weird. It doesn't make them false.
Yeah, like also one interesting there are I've seen a paper that proposes that the unidirectional air breathing does go back to the ancestral reptile basically, and they propose that unidirectional air breathing may be another way of reptiles to conserve water. Like you may have noticed that every breath, like if you're outside in cold weather and you breathe out, you notice that your breath is foggy. That's the water that you lose with every breath you take. So perhaps unidirectional air breathing was a way to not another way to conserve water. Perhaps one possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, like archosaur, like aside from unidirectional air breathing, archosaurs are also characterized by having parental care. Like both birds and also crocodilians take care of their young. They also build nests. Like lizards don't tend to do that, if I remember correctly. They also vocalize. Like both crocodiles and birds, they make noises. Again, squamates tend to be very silent.
Yeah.
Like lizards are very silent pets if you have them. Yeah.
I had lizards, and yeah, they're very quiet. Snakes can be a little loud, but even then, it's usually just exhaling strongly rather than some kind of like vocalization like you might hear from a bird or a mammal.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And also fourth chambered hearts as well. Yes. Yeah. There are also some unique aspects to the fourth chambered heart that crocodilians have. There are some very notable differences between the fourth chambered heart of crocodilians compared to the birds. Yeah, but that's for another slide later on, much later on. All right, next slide. Oh, yeah, here it is. I forgot that I had the slide right here. So yeah, sorry about that. So here is the fourth chambered heart of the crocodilian.
Yay!
Crocs. Yay! I thought I misremembered putting this slide much later on. Oh well. Here is the crocs have what's called a bypass. So the Dapper mentioned called the foramen of Panizza, which
It's
is a
Italian.
connection with and it's a connection between the left and right aortic arch. It's also interesting that like, in birds only have the right aortic arch, and mammals only have the left aortic arch. But crocodilians retain both. Retain both aortic arches from the fishy ancestors. Like fish have both aortic arches as well. And also, I believe also amphibians also have the left and right aortic arch. So what happened is that the birds lost the left and mammals lost the right, but crocodilians still have both. And they have a unique connection between the two. So, and they also have a valve that can block the left aortic arch. Oh no, sorry, a valve that can block the blood from being pumped into the lungs. So when crocs breathe air, blood goes through the lungs and remains separate from the deoxygenated blood, like it is in us. But when crocodilians go for a dive and stop breathing, the cork-toothed valve closes, preventing the blood from being pumped into the lungs. So now it's being bypassed into the left aortic arch, and from that it is able to flow through the foramen of Panizza into the right aortic arch. So you can see in the image, like on the left image, that's the air breathing mode of the heart. And when crocodilians go for a dive, the heart switches to essentially a 3-chambered mode almost. The image you see on the right. So it's a very, very unique way of changing between two very different modes of blood circulation. And I believe they do this because if you don't use your lungs, you don't need to pump blood through your lungs. You just want to pump blood throughout your whole body and preventing any wasteful pumping. Basically, that's my guess, at least. All right. Any other remarks on this, Dapper?
No, I think you said pretty much everything I would have.
All right. Next slide. So yeah, as we have discussed before, there is a very strong evidence indicating that the ancestral archosaurs were very highly active, like they were cursorially adapted. They could run. They can even run on 2 legs, facultatively even. So it seems that crocodilians have reverted back to a very slow metabolism lifestyle. While the dinosaurs and pterosaurs, they became even more active. So on one side, they became more active, and on the other side, on the crocodilian side, they became much more conservative in the use of energy. But even though they have lost this, crocs still bear the indelible stamp of their endothermic ancestry. You can see some images. Somewhere in Florida, you have an alligator doing the high walk. They can still stand upright almost in this way. Something they showing off their endothermic ancestry almost. And you also have like one species of crocodile called the Cuban crocodile, my personal favorite. It can gallop. So you can look up images of the Cuban crocodile just galloping, chasing down a zookeeper. Very.
Cuban crocodiles are cool because they have horns.
Yeah. They also have
horn-like
horns,
projections. To be fair,
yeah,
but whatever. They have horns.
almost. Like compared to all the crocodilians, at least the living ones, it is the most horny of all the crocodilians.
Yay!
Yay!
We love to see it.
Yeah. All right, next slide. So this is something that it is controversial that I'm about to say, but before I say it, a few things to cover about Evo. So in Evo, you have a concept called the homeotic genes, or also called selector genes, which function to establish organ identity. So when you express these homeotic genes in a different location, or you suppress it, then you can transform one organ into another. And one famous example is in fruit flies. If you in the left you see the fruit fly, regarding the ultra-bithorax gene, it essentially established the organ identity of the second pair of wings. But the second pair of wings in fruit flies are modified into halteres. So when you express the ultrapythorax genes also in the first pair of wings, then both pair of wings become halteres. So you have the situation on the top right there. In the middle, you have the normal situation where you have the front two wings normally, and the hind wings are halteres. But then if you suppress the ultrapythorax, then both regions will develop into a pair of wings. And you can also see similar cases in flowers. You have some homeotic genes that express or establish flower organ identity. So if you overexpress it, then you will change leaves into flowers, or if you suppress these genes, then you will turn flowers into leaves, basically. So you can change one organ into the other, even in plants as well. In the case of chickens with feathers, like chickens it's a common. We commonly say that the scales on the feet of birds are scales, but they are actually modified feathers. They aren't the scales that you find in lizards. They are a type of feather that has been modified into a scute, basically. And we can still change these between each other. So if you express some genes, then you will transform the scutes back into feathers, as you can see in some varieties of chickens, the domestic chickens, they can have a mutation where they express feathers on their feet as well. And some chickens also there's a mutated chicken that has a mutated scaleless gene, which causes the skin to be completely naked, no feathers and nor scutes in that case. So there's also a similar connection between feathers and scutes. You can transform scutes into feathers and feathers into scutes. Yeah. All right. Any other questions about this?
Do you have anything about the crocodilians getting feather-like structures in embryo?
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going with this.
Yay!
Yeah. Next slide.
It's like we would write the exact same thing.
Next slide, Peter. Yeah. So one thing that you need to bear in mind is that homeotic genes are not sufficient to develop an organ. In one case, you have called the PAX6 gene, which is often the master regulator for eye development. And that gene is also shared between fruit flies and mouse. So PAX6 induces the activation of eye development in fruit fly, and eventually they will develop a normal eye as well. And the same in the case for the mouse. So when you give a mouse the fruit fly version of PAX6, it functions the same way, but the mouse will still develop a normal mouse eye. It won't develop a fruit fly eye, even if you give it the fruit fly version of PAX6. And if you give a plant PAX6, nothing will happen because they don't know how to develop an eye. So PAX6 is only an inducer. It only induces a chain of processes that will develop an eye in mice and fruit flies, but not in. Of course, plants are not able to respond to PAX6 as a signal. So that's one thing to bear in mind. It's very important. So yeah, next slide. So as I mentioned before, that an inducer like PAX6 is not sufficient to develop an eye. But here we have a curious case. When we give you have an experiment where they gave a skin graft from a crocodilian. I believe it was an alligator, right? If I'm not mistaken.
I believe it was, alligator.
Yeah, an alligator skin, yeah. So they on in the it's a very small image, but on the top right you see a control. We have normal embryonic alligator skin, developing scales, but then below that they gave it a scale to feather converter. It was previously identified in birds. In birds, this
Okay, hold
gene.
on. I'm just now noticing that your Ceratosaurus has a top hat. I appreciate it.
That is quite good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I couldn't let that go without acknowledging and appreciating it. So thank you. Continue.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Yes. But yeah. But in the bottom image, you see that the researchers gave this test they ectopically expressed a scale to feather converter gene. It was identified in birds. Like in birds, it induces the development of feathers as opposed to scales. But when they gave this same gene to alligators, the alligator's skin started to grow a feather bud-like growth in the skin, basically. You can see the image on that as well. So it's very weird. Like as I mentioned before, if you gave PAX6 to a plant, you wouldn't expect it to develop an eye, of course, because the plant doesn't know how to develop an eye. Even it doesn't know how to respond to PAX6. But somehow, for some reason, the alligator skin can respond to this feather converter gene. So there's one interesting possibility that perhaps feathers as a organ is a very ancient organ among archosaurs. Like we know, like there are different types of feathers. Like we have the pennaceous feathers. You can see the central shaft colored red. They are, as far as we know, they are restricted to the Maniraptors. They aren't like, but we also have the filamentous feathers, like the stage 1 and stage 2 feathers, and those are very widespread among. They are even found among the ornithischians as well. We have a few examples of ornithischians with stage 1 and also stage 2 feathers as well. And in pterosaurs, it's a more controversial. Like I believe some researchers believe the pycnofibers among pterosaurs are independent from that of birds, but I would suspect that they are not independent. So that's my opinion, at least.
Probably homologous, yeah.
Yeah. So if we take that as face value, then feathers, or at least some form of feather, like a stage 1 feather, is ubiquitous among the pan group of birds, among the avimetatarsalians. But then, interestingly, we can ask, is it even more ancient? Perhaps the ancestors of the crocodilians also have this fuzzy integument? Like that would explain why alligators are able to respond to the scale to feather converter like this. They are able to grow they are able to have a feather bud-like growth in their skin, as the experiment indicates. So that's a very interesting possibility. Again, this is very controversial. I don't see anybody suggesting that the ancestors to the alligator or the ancestors to the crocodilians did have fuzzy. I don't know. I don't see many researchers suggesting that the Pseudosuchians ever had false. It's just a very interesting possibility that I am noting when reading the research that shows that for some reason alligators can initiate feather development almost for some reason. Yeah, it's very interesting to note. Did you have anything else to note, Dapper, about the experiment showing?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. But one of the things is that in relatively, if crocodilians didn't have, Pseudosuchians never had any fuzzy integument, they might have still been close enough related to the avimetatarsalians, who probably did basally, that swapping genes from one to the other might still be able to activate similar morphological changes. So I don't think it's on its own, I don't think this is enough to say that, oh yeah, well maybe
Yeah.
Archosauria is just ancestrally fuzzy. But it does say, hey, more investigation
Maybe.
is needed.
Yeah.
We should look more into it.
It's your.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go. Sorry. Go finish for.
I was just gonna say I don't know if genetics on its own is ever going to be able to answer this. I think what might end up happening is we just might need a larger sample of skin impressions from Pseudosuchians. Of course, the problem there is, well, skin impressions
There aren't
are
many.
extremely uncommon. And the
Right.
farther back in time you go, the less common any fossil is. And you have to go pretty far back to get to the common ancestors of Avametatarsalia and Pseudosuchia. Almost said Crocotarsalia, but well, that's wrong.
Right. Yeah. It's just like if you give a gene that induces teeth development into birds and they develop teeth embryonically, like that's not surprising because we know that the ancestors of birds did have teeth. So it just like this type of experiments makes me wonder, maybe there is something going on in the ancestry. But of course, as you say, the slam dunk would be a Pseudosuchian skin impression showing some fuzzy integument. That would be very interesting to see. Or maybe even outside the crown group of archosaurs, maybe a Archosauromorph with fuzzy integument would also be interesting to see. Yeah. All right. Next slide. So now we have officially entered the pan group of the crocodilians, the Pseudosuchians. Yay!
And we're
we all-
almost at the end of the first episode.
We're almost at the end of the episode, and now we just begin. All right. But one the main difference that distinguishes the Pseudosuchians from the Avametatarsalia is the ankle bones. So the primitive condition that we see in the Archosauromorphs is you have like the calcaneum and astragalus, where they have a reciprocal pec and socket joints between them. So yeah, like you have two joints, two pec and socket joints, reciprocal. So basically, the astragalus has a pec and socket, and so does the calcaneum, and they interlock like that between these two, as the two arrows show above. Yeah. In the case of the Pseudosuchians, they have what's called the crocodile normal ankle, where you only have one pec and socket joint. So the astragalus has a pec that fits into the calcaneum pocket, and that forms a rotary joint, allowing the foot of the Pseudosuchians to swivel, basically. But there is some something going on. It turns out that this is a ancestral archosaur trait. So even the ancestors of birds also had this ankle joint, but later members within the Avametatarsalia, they adopted a new ankle called the advanced mesotarsal ankle, which has which in them the astragalus is the main ankle joint and or the main ankle bone, and there's only one hinge-like joint within the ankle, basically. Again, this evolved within the Avametatarsalia while they lost the crocodile normal ankle. And you have to see if you also one transitional fossil on the bottom. They have, I believe, they have the crocodile normal ankle, and they also have what's called a 2 rows of dorsal osteoderms. Previously, it was believed that the 2 rows of dorsal osteoderms was unique for the Pseudosuchians, but it turns out it's now also present in the early members of the Avametatarsalia. So again, the differences between early between early Pseudosuchians and early Avametatarsalia are very, very subtle. Very subtle differences in between the ankle bones. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Any other remarks? All right, the next slide. So again, I went way overboard with this one. So I want to add more detail to the whole story of Pseudosuchians. So I added some color codes to the images. So any group colored green were terrestrial, and some groups that were freshwater or marine are color coded as cyan and blue, respectively. And I also show some pictograms denoting the geography of where these fossils are found, on what continent they are found. All right. So next slide. All right. So the first group of Pseudosuchians that we are encountering, the phytosaurs, like an early. Oh, sorry.
Are you sure phytosaurs are Pseudosuchians?
Yeah, there's also one interesting debate about it, because there is some debate of where exactly the phytosaurs belong. They are either an early diverging member within the Pseudosuchians, or they diverged just outside the archosaurs. It's also a possibility, yeah. So you're right.
In fact, I believe the consensus is it's still debated, but I believe the consensus currently is closer to they're actually diverging before Archosauria than it is their Pseudosuchians. So,
so I'm not up to date on that one then. I am not up to date on that one. So yeah.
Yeah. So look, they share a lot of things in common with actually modern crocodilians, and most people couldn't say that they're not crocodilians if you saw one. But yeah, it probably should have been placed earlier. But then again, like I said, there is still debate. So
Yeah. Yeah, as you mentioned, like this is yet another group that has adopted the crocodile lifestyle of being semi-aquatic, having the same plan as well. Yeah, so you can, but there are still very, very notable differences between the phytosaurs and the modern crocodilians. Like one notable difference is where the nose is located. Like on the crocodilians, the nose is located at the tip of the snout, as you can see in the alligator, like the image of the alligator skull on the top right. And you can compare that to a phytosaur, where the nose is all the way very close to the front of the eyes. It's almost like what whales.
That's what I was thinking. They're on the way to
not to the same
whales.
extent. Yeah. Almost,
like what Ambulocetus had, where it was like midway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, all the nostrils are very high up on the snout. Yes. And you also have like many interesting forms. Like most phytosaurs were semi-aquatic freshwater things, but you also have a genus called Necrosaurus, which appears to be terrestrial, a terrestrial phytosaur. And you also have one species or one genus called Mysthriosuchus, and that one appeared to have been marine, still semi-aquatic, but also marine, and it appeared to have been. It was present in both the west side of the Atlantic and the east side of the Atlantic. So right around the time when the Atlantic was about to be separated, forming a very narrow seaway between North America and Europe, that's where the Mysthriosuchus lived. Yeah. Very interesting.
Oh.
And you also have... Oh, so go ahead.
I was going to say, one interesting thing is the reason that we're calling this group of, closer to crocs than birds, Pseudosuchia, is because of the consensus shifting on Phytosauria to being just outside Archosauria. Because the old term that used to encompass all the animals that we're going to be talking about going forward was Crocotarsalia, but it was defined as the closest relatives, the common ancestor of phytosaurs, and then some or Avametatarsalia archosaur, which I don't remember which one it was. And once you define a taxon that way, you can't just normally change it. But when it was realized that meant that all archosaurs are crocotarsalians if our phytosaurs branch basally to Archosauria, we now need a new term for all the archosaurs more closely related to crocodilians than to birds. And so the older term Pseudosuchia, which had been basically abandoned and had never really been formally defined, was sort of like picked up out of the trash bin of taxonomic history. And we're like, okay, what if this is the new clade for anything that's closer to crocodilians than it is to birds? And so phytosaurs are like the entire reason that we're calling this group Pseudosuchians instead of crocodylians, which that's a switch that didn't happen that long ago. I think it was, I don't even, it wasn't even a decade ago, I don't think.
Yeah. Also, like the Pseudosuchia means false crocodiles because it was believed that it was originally believed that the Pseudosuchians were not related to crocodilians, but eventually it was like, oh yeah, no, they are ancestral to the crocodilians. So yeah.
And ironically, crocodilians are false crocodiles.
Yeah, exactly. The name stuck, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
all right.
Taxonomy is a weird thing.
Mm-hmm. And also one thing to note is like there is one transitional fossil within the phytosaurs. Like as I mentioned, that in the Phytosauria, the nostrils is found all the way at the top, closer to the eyes. But we have one transitional fossil called the Diandongosuchus, which has a pretty normal-ish skull relative to the more derived phytosaurs. Yeah. All right. Next slide. So, like one subset of Pseudosuchia is called Suchia. It stands for crocodile, but it is not synonymous with the taxon Crocodilia. So again, as Dapper mentioned, taxonomy is weird. So sometimes the names can mean this thing, but it probably doesn't mean that thing. That's the same with Sauria. Sauria means lizard, but within saurians, saurians also include birds and crocodilians and such.
Yeah. In paleontological use, it's basically lost any connotation of being associated with lizards per se, and it has basically just come to be reptile.
Yeah. So Sauria basically now means reptile. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So in Suchia, it is there's a cladistic definition. It's defined as the least inclusive clade that includes the Aedosaurs, Rausuchus, Prestosuchus, and the living crocodilus. Exactly what traits characterizes the Suchia is a bit ambiguous. There are two studies by Nesbitt and Escura that are trying to identify features or traits that characterize this group as a whole. They come to different sets of traits, but they agree on one trait, and this is one the one trait that to agree on. The calcaneal tuber is significantly wider than it was tall. That's the only trait they agree on that signifies or typifies this group, at least among the early members of the Suchians. All right. Next slide. And I believe we are almost running out of time. So
So if you want to,
this is our last slide. Then we can stop.
All right. Yeah, we'll do this one, then we'll call it.
All right. So within Suchians, there is the Ornithosuchus that I briefly mentioned before. The Ornithosuchus. This group was originally believed to have been more closely related to the bird line, the Avimetatarsallians, but now they are now falling within the Pseudosuchians, or specifically the Suchia at least. And they have a very different ankle joint compared to all the other Pseudosuchians. Like as I mentioned before, Pseudosuchians have the crocodile normal ankle, but the Ornithosuchus have the reversed condition. Like now the astragalus has a socket for the calcaneum. Calcaneum, I believe. Yes. So it's instead of like in the crocodile normal, you have a peg fitting into the socket in the calcaneum, but now in Ornithosuchus, it's exactly the reverse. The peg and the sockets are reversed between the two bones. And they also have very odd shaped skulls. Like you have a very between the maxilla and the premaxilla, there's like a very large gap where two large teeth from the lower jaw fit inside. So it's a very oddly, it's almost like a reverse saber-toothed condition, basically.
A massive underbite.
Yeah, massive underbite. Yeah, it's actually an overbite in this case because the snout, the top snout, goes over the bottom jaw. Yeah, but instead like in the saber tooth you have large upper teeth, but here we have large lower teeth, and there is like a proposition that they basically did the same thing as saber-toothed cats. Like they ambushed the prey, and they carefully delivered a very powerful bite. Carefully delivered. Yeah, to kill their prey. That's like a one proposition of how they lived, and they weren't very diverse. Like the 4 species that I'm showing right here, that's all the species that are known to us, I believe. Yeah. So they aren't very wide. They aren't, but they were like there were 2 of them are in Europe and 2 of them are. Or let's see, only 1 of them is in Europe and 3 of them are in Argentina. So yeah, so maybe there were a lot more of them, but we only have these in the fossil record known to us.
Right.
I mean, there almost certainly were a lot more of them because that's just the rule of thumb. Anytime you find a fossil taxon, you can assume with pretty high confidence that there would have been a bunch of other closely related species that existed at various times and in various places, like, temporally and geographically related. But we just don't have a very perfect fossil record. And the way you can tell that is that we keep naming new genera and species and even families and whatnot in various groups. If the fossil record, if it was very complete in one of 2 ways, if we just had pretty much everything that was in there, then we just wouldn't find new things. And if we didn't know that for everything that we find, there was new stuff that we haven't found, then we also, again, wouldn't keep finding members of old groups. But we keep doing that. So that until that stops, there is absolutely no grounds to say that the fossil record is anything close to complete, either in terms of preservation or in terms of what of it we've found.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So I believe that's it for now.
Okay.
So 30 slides, and we still have over 100 to go. Jesus.
Okay. Well, it has been interesting so far. I've been enjoying it. We have reached the Pseudosuchians now. So thank you, Nesslig, and we will pick this up when we return next Thursday.
Are you available next Thursday, Dapper?
I will have to double check. I do have a busy time coming up here. So.
Speaking of busy time, I will be over on Dapper's channel. Dapper down
That's
there.
Me, yep.
I'll be over on Dapper's channel on Tuesday for Jackson with Jackson at that is 8 Central. Yes.
9 Eastern, 6 Pacific, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so come and watch us deal with Bad Jackson.
Yeah. Dr. Jackson, the Bad Jackson. Jackson, when do we get to call you Dr. Jackson?
Whenever I go to doctoral school. Whenever Camilla and I move to another state so that we can go to a university with a doctoral program. So.
And just not be in Louisiana.
Yeah.
It moves to a state where vaccines are legal.
Yeah, I mean, give it a little bit of time here. Jeff Landry's probably like, how much can I get away with, actually? So anyway, I didn't vote for the guy, so there's that. All right, so join us next Thursday when we come back, and thank you, Dapper, for joining us, and thank you, Nesslig, for the presentation for this part of the presentation. Thank you, Peter, for hosting us, and everybody for watching. And we will see all of you next time. So bye everybody.